Hey there, CT Tinker here. In this video you will learn how to use Rigify, and the goal is to rig a character using the humanoid meta rig. If you don't have Rigify enabled, just navigate to Edit Preferences Add-ons and search for Rigify, then enable the add-on. By doing so, you will find other armatures when you press Shift A. Now we are interested in the human meta rig. So let's just create a human meta rig, and maybe you're off scale, so scale it up and down and apply the scale when it matches your character by pressing Ctrl A. And when you have done so, navigate to the Properties panel in the Armature tab and go under Viewport Display and enable In Front. Also consider to enable axes. Axes are kinda advanced, but they help you to actually see the bone roll, and sometimes this is really handy because when bones have a weird roll, it may happen that you get a weird rotation in the end. Alright, now let's get to the aligning. At first, I usually go to front view by pressing numpad 1. And then I enable x-axis mirroring. It's this x in the top left corner. And usually you want to keep the legs totally straight, especially in front view. I just added a slight bend because I wanted that this character walks like a cowboy, but I eventually changed this up in the end. And then it's just about moving around the bones by selecting their tail or head, by grabbing them by pressing G, or rotating them by pressing R. And well, in front view, we mainly just move them around by pressing G, so they more or less align to our character. For now, I won't focus on the face, so I just scale it a little bit so it matches a little bit better to the proportions of my character. And then you gotta imagine there is this large head bone, and those two bones below the head are actually the neck. And under the head bone is another bone, which is the parent of the face. And so you basically have to make sure to always move around the head bone and the underlying bone together. Otherwise, things maybe get messed up. I start hiding a lot of bones, especially the face, and then also I will start hiding the arms because I will focus on them later. And now I switch to side view by pressing numpad 3 and start aligning from the side. And changing the visibility of bones by hiding them really helps to see a lot better what's going on. Here is another bone, the bone which connects the neck bones to the spine, and those are disconnected, but they actually have to stay connected, so make sure to select always the bone and tail together when you are attempting to move them around. Always make sure to add a slight bend to the knee in side view, and this little bone which is disconnected is basically the heel control, so just move it a little bit behind the heel. Now you see me moving around the head bone, and when moving around the head bone, as mentioned, always make sure to grab the underlying bone as well. And now it's actually already time to align the arms. I do align the arms usually in top view by pressing numpad 7, and yeah, this process goes usually pretty fast, and then I move to the hands. And it's interesting that you can select bone chains by pressing L, which is really convenient when working with the fingers. So you can select the finger bones just by pressing L, and then shift select the bone which connects them to the hand. And it's basically good practice to always move them together because they have to stay connected. And when rigging the hands, I usually like to make a lot of windows. So I have a top view, side view, etc. To actually see what's going on. And then I also hide all the bones which aren't required in this process, and start aligning. And here's another neat little trick. You can place your cursor on a knuckle, then set the orientation and pivot to cursor. And I missed this step a little bit, so also setting the orientation to cursor. And now when you place the cursor on the knuckle and rotate a finger, it rotates around the knuckle. And this is really helpful to align the bones. So I'm usually only roughly align them and then enable snapping. This is this magnet icon at the top. And as I have X-ray enabled, the snapping causes some issues because you see the underlying faces. So disable X-ray and just align the bones to the fingers. And in this step, this is gonna be a little bit rough, but we will clean this up later. So just roughly align the finger bones to the geometry by snapping it on top of it. So I have moved around the thumb bones a lot, so I have to fix the rolls because they are really messed up in this case. And to fix the rolls, I just select the entire thumb bones, then go to armature, bone roll, recalculate roll, and choose global y-axis. And the one bone in the chain doesn't look properly aligned, so I roll it so it aligns properly like the other bones. And yeah, then I focus on aligning the bones even more. I end up to change up the cursor to the orientation that I have just the bounding box and as pivot and the orientation as normal, because this really helps aligning, so you can really easily maneuver the bones around. And also I disable snapping in this case, because when I actually want to snap, I can just press Control and then I just slide the bones around till they really match on top of the hand and are always in straight lines. It's important to sometimes look from the downside of the hand, so you see if there's something badly aligned, especially the tips, and then just snap them back on top by pressing Control and dragging them to the top of the finger. Actually, the bone rolls of my hand here are looking great, and I wouldn't have to fix here anything, but if there are any issues, you might consider to just select the bones which have issues, or, well, in this case, I'm just selecting all from pinky to index finger, and go to armature, bone roll, recalculate roll, and choose global x-axis. And then the fingers usually align pretty well, and maybe you have to change up a little bit, but well, mine have been good from the beginning and basically nothing has changed. We still have as orientation the normal, and now it's pretty easy to move in the bones a little bit. I like to do this because then the fingers aren't that pointy. And well, here you see I didn't select the bones on top at first, so I moved in just the bones from the finger, and this is an issue because the bones have to be connected. If you disconnected the finger bones from the hand bones in this process, this is really easy to fix. Just press Shift S and choose cursor to select it, and then take the head or tail from the bone which is disconnected and choose selection to cursor when pressing Shift S. I just did this for all the bones for good measure, even though it wasn't necessary. And yeah, this is basically how to align body and hands. Now let's move to the face. I usually start hiding all the bones which I'm not really interested in, and that's why I'm starting with bones which I can hide easily. So I just start aligning the ears. I disable X-ray and enable snapping, or well, use control for snapping. And then I'm just aligning the ears, hiding the ears. Then I start aligning the teeth and hiding the teeth. Same with the tongue, because this is for me the fastest process to get rid of bones which I don't want in my rigging process, or which probably end up to distract me while rigging. Then just take the remaining face bones and align them to your character. And here's a thing which is quite interesting. In the rig setup from Rigify, this bone here, which I circled around, is actually the pivot when the mouth opens and closes. So you can consider to move it down a lot so the angle gets a bit wider. Like when it's up on top, it's a bit steeper. You can play around with it. And as I mentioned, Rigify is really modular, so you can change this up all the time. There is nothing to regret here. Once I'm done with the jaw, I just hide the jawbone and move to the chin. This little bone tip basically goes to the lower lip, and then the bones basically move around the chin. Now I want to align the bones from the mouth, but there's an issue. I've hidden a bone which is required to align them properly because the mouth corner is connected to a bone from the jaw. And this is really easy to fix. I'm just pressing Alt-H to unhide all the bones. Then I'm pressing Ctrl-I to invert the selection. Then I'm shift selecting the jawbone, which I don't want to be hidden. Invert the selection again by pressing Ctrl-I, and then just press H to hide the bones which are selected, so everything is as it's supposed to be. Then I'm again using snapping to align the bones, and the lip bones usually have to be aligned around the lips. And well, the lips also should be aligned in basically straight lines, so the upper and downer lip bones basically should match from their proportions. The bone under the nose basically goes close to the upper lip. And there's another line which actually helps you how to align your character. Basically, you can draw a line from the cheekbone to the middle eyebrow, and this line usually should go through the center of the eye, and then all the bones which are in this line should stay in line. So this is just a recommendation and usually yields better results. The nose usually is just close to the end of the nostrils. And well, I started unhiding some more bones, which seemed to be necessary in the rigging process. And well, another thing about the face, all those eyebrow bones should stay connected. And so with the face, there are a lot of bones which you can disconnect, but you shouldn't disconnect them. So try to always select them with a box selection, by example. There are other cursor modes which you can try out by pressing W. I just like the box selection way too much to not use it. So, well, you can just try it out. There's some circular selection, which is probably even better, but I'm just a fan of the box selection. Usually it's pretty good also to just select bone groups like those loops from the eyes by pressing L and then rotate and move them around so they align more or less where you want them to be, and then use snapping again to actually put them in place. Now to the nose, where the three bones are meeting. This is basically the nose tip, and the bone end there is basically where the nose tip ends. And the other bones under the nose, there are two bones basically. At first, those flow around the bottom of the nose, and the last bone goes, as mentioned, basically down to the upper lip. And besides, it's actually pretty visible where everything should be, at least I think so. And then it's just about aligning it properly. I usually don't like if the lips are totally at the edge, so I move them usually in a little bit, but this really depends on your character and how you like to have your lips rigged. And once everything looks more or less proper, I start to realign again. I have a little bit of an issue here with the snapping because I have a really low poly character. And that's why I end up changing up the snapping mode, because there are just not enough vertices around. So I go to the snapping and choose edge snapping. And this really helped me to align my bones here, especially with a low poly character. I usually try to get a nice even curve because I want that the eye usually opens and closes smoothly. And I always try to keep distances at an even level. And the eyebrows I basically just realign a little bit because I've used vertex snapping before and I felt like edge snapping is more or less better when using a low poly character. By the way, I'm always keeping the orientation to the normal because this really helps to align bones. I just prefer to work this way, to use snapping by pressing Control and to align by using the normal as orientation. At a certain point, it's actually a quite interesting concept to just generate a human meta rig and look at it, because basically it's set up properly. And if there are really huge differences to your character model, may remodel them. This can be especially good for beginners because you have a baseline which really can help a lot to figure out how to set up the character. Last but not least, let's align the eye bones. To align the eye bones, it's probably the easiest to leave edit mode, select an eye, go in edit mode again, then select all the vertices, press Shift S and choose cursor to selected. Now the cursor should be in the center of the eye. Tap out of edit mode, go to the rig again, go in edit mode, and then select the tail from the bone and choose selection to cursor. And then the bone tail is exactly in the center of the eye, which is basically what you want. Usually the bone head should be just positioned by snapping it to the eye, and I'm doing a little mistake here by moving the center of the eye bone around, and this will end up in a weird rotation. So I had to clean up this in the end, but whatever. Here I'm generating the rig, and this is basically the first step done. When you want to bind your character to the generated Rigify rig, select your mesh first and then the rig, and press Ctrl P and choose with automatic weights. This usually yields pretty good results, and then your character mesh is bound to the Rigify rig. When you generated the rig, just select it, go in pose mode, and just start to move around some portions of the rig. It doesn't have to be assigned with weights, etc., because this is a good point to spot mistakes. Now, well, the fingers are still behaving weirdly. The rotations don't seem to be correct even though we changed up the bone rolls. And this is basically because we didn't tell Rigify to actually use our bone rolls which we have assigned before. To fix this, go back to the Meta Rig go in pose mode and then select the finger bones. You will see there is an option under the bone panel and it's called Rigify type. So select all the finger bones and then choose X manual as bend rotation axis in the options from the Rigify type. Also consider to change up the B-bone segments to 1, because I usually don't like bendy bones in the fingers, but you can use bendy bones if you like. And once you have done so, right-click the values and choose Copy to Selected, and then just regenerate the rig. So when you regenerate the rig and go in pose mode and move around the bones, it should just basically make sense at this point. And well, there are really neat features to the Rigify rig. By example, you can select those, I don't know how to call them, drivers at the front, and then just press S to scale and Y, especially when you do this around the normal as orientation. And this is a really easy way to open and close the fingers. But there's more. Also, the hand seems to be badly aligned. And this is because there is also this automatic generation from the arms. So I'm going back to the Meta Rig, select the arm, the top bone of the arm, and choose X manual. And also, well, I get rid of the B-bone segments. And I'm also doing this for the legs. For the legs, I just keep the orientation as automatic because everything seems to behave correctly in this case. But basically, this is what you should be going for if there are some issues with rotations of the generated rig. It also can be an issue if a bone which actually should be centered is not in center, then the driver, or let's call it driver or IK driver, is usually rotated or looks weirdly. And yeah, then you have to center out the rig. Now I've regenerated the rig, and I usually end up to play around with the rig to see if everything works as expected and to just check if the controls are working. If anything behaves weirdly at this point, you probably have to change up the generation of the Meta Rig and maybe realign some bones. And if everything behaves properly, well, it's time to move on and to bind the eyes and teeth and tongue to the character. To bind it, I usually go first in object mode, and if the Meta Rig is still enabled, hide it. And then also the mesh actually is distracting in this process. I'm binding the bones to the organization bones, which are in the last layer of the rig. And then I'm selecting the rig, go in edit mode and select the bone I want to bind to, in this case the eye bone. Then I select the eye, shift select the rig and set parent to bone. Now the eye is bound to the rig. I repeat this process here. I select the rig, select the eye bone, then I shift select the eye, shift select the rig again, and set parent to bone. It's a really, really weird clicking order, but that's just how it is. So you click on your rig, then select the bone you want to bind to, shift select the object, then shift select the rig again, and then press Ctrl P and bind it to the bone. I know it's weird. And for the tongue has several bones and it's not static, so shift select the same order again, but this time set parent with automatic weights. And now everything is bound to the character. To test it, just go in pose mode, and when you open the mouth, the teeth should be, well, deforming with the mouth rotation. And you should be able to move around the tongue. Maybe you have to choose in front for the bones and enable all the controls to see it. But everything seems to work. and yeah, now I'm basically happy with that. But you see there are some really weird deformations, so this has to be weight painted. You can also try to realign the bones and get better results, but at a certain point there is nothing around weight painting. But the automatic weights usually do a great job, so it's not that much work, usually at least. And yeah, so thanks for watching. That's about it. Now in the background you see the character just animated with Blend AR mocap, and it's a lot of fun. I will make videos on how to clean up and apply data from Blend AR mocap to a character in a short period of time. But this setup is also a great foundation to make it work. And also thanks to all of my Patreons and all the comments. I can just say all you guys are awesome. And if you want to support me, you can join my Patreon. It would be a blast. And yeah, see you around.